Well, welcome everyone. I am actually going to do most of the leading and the facilitating of tonight's study session, although I would say that pretty much anybody on that end of the table would be equally capable of doing this because we've been rolling around in this for such a long period of time. So the study session is, as we know, on our 2016-17 kindergarten and enrollment mitigation update. So this will actually be sort of a further discussion of the options that we're looking at. And I just want to point out that although most of what we'll talk about will center around the kindergarten options for next year, that is really a larger picture for how we're going to mitigate enrollment in general. Because as you know, the last several years we've been using kindergarten as kind of our lever and our fix for how we're dealing with our overcrowded schools. So I just want to put in that context that although most of the conversation is about kindergarten, it's still within the context of a broader conversation about how we're addressing the fact that we're continuing to grow at our elementaries in the north end of the district in general, and how we're going to address that next year. So just kind of want to set the stage a little bit. We always knew that 16-17 would be the most challenging year for us before all of the changes of 17-18 with the opening of North Creek, grade reconfiguration and boundary adjustments. As we've been growing in enrollment, 350 to 450 students a year. That last year, obviously, before 17-18 was going to be the most difficult and challenging year for that. We anticipate that next year we're going to continue to see enrollment growth similar to recent years, both in numbers as well as in location. So in pretty much the usual suspects and pretty much in similar patterns as we've been seeing it in the last several years. And then we got thrown a little bit of a curveball in the last legislative session when the legislature implemented optional funding for full-day kindergarten in 2016-17, a year earlier than what we had been planning for in 17-18, which has been part of their timeline for a long period of time. So this added a further dimension of complexity as well as opportunity around next year's planning, but it certainly has complicated matters, and we've been wrestling with this, as you know, for the last several months. So you've seen this chart before in previous study sessions. Hopefully Ken and Dave, you've seen it a little bit. So this is just kind of an overview of sort of where we've been around enrollment trends and capacity and such. So you can see our bond cycles, our 4-year bond cycles up here. Property that we've acquired, so the multi-site in 2010, the North Creek site that we're actively building on now in 2012, and then obviously we just conditionally purchased the Wellington property recently. North Creek High School is scheduled to open in 2017. That again will be our first school that's opened in the district in about 20 years. And that's more unusual for us than the prior 30 or 40 years in our district when we were opening up schools on about a less than 2-year average, opening up a new school. So boundary adjustments, again, last major boundary adjustment was in 2007. It was intended to be sort of a 5-year fix. The Great Recession added a few years of longevity to that because the housing market collapsed, and so we did see sort of a leveling off of enrollment growth in the north end of the district that then has ramped up in recent years. Projected for a new, our boundary adjustment here that the board will be taking up in January, and then anticipate a smaller boundary adjustment in 2020, contingent upon a successful bond measure in 2018, and then construction on the multi-site to follow that. Elementary portables, you can kind of just see the pattern here in recent years. That's essentially followed the enrollment growth that we've seen. And then this demonstrates the enrollment growth. And again, what we're seeing is primarily the growth at the elementary levels. We all know that. We're seeing it at our north end schools that are significantly impacted. And yeah, David.
I just wanted to ask, so this year 2016, it's the highest amount of the elementary school population.
Yeah.
What were we planning on doing with respect to staffing and portables to address that fact that that's going to be the largest number of elementary school students we've had in a while?
Yeah, I would say we were continuing to look at the mitigation options that we've had on the table, so additional portables, probably additional kindergarten program moves, probably reduction in the number of full-day kindergarten offerings in different places, perhaps utilization of the Northshore Primary Center. So those were kind of the levers we're looking at. Really in what we're going to talk about in a minute, probably option one is really what looks most like what sort of our default plan was heading into 16-17.
But it's true that in 2014, we were planning on having a North Shore Primary Center that was going to take part of our full-day kindergarten
Not
and part-time.
kindergarten, not necessarily full-day kindergarten.
But we would have had both there originally.
Originally, potentially, we could have had full-day kindergarten there with the original 12
Right.
classroom plan there. And that's changed. So, K-3 class size, you know, that's part of the McCleary ruling, so that's out there on the horizon for us. We're probably, to truly get to actual classes of 17 to 18 kids, we're probably about 4 to 5 elementary short right now, district-wide. And then full-day kindergarten, as I mentioned, was scheduled for 17-18, and then as we know, the legislature moved that up for optional beginning in 16-17. And so you can see the differential of kind of what the differences are of, you know, a spread of about 1,700 elementary students district-wide. That grade reconfiguration is going to provide relief. And so now we're stuck in this dilemma of not only dealing with the enrollment growth and the high number next year, but also what do we do about this full-day kindergarten situation.
Wait, say that, make that statement again. The relief part?
Yeah, so when we were planning here, we had full-day kindergarten plugged in here.
Right.
And that's the same year that as we implement grade reconfiguration, our overall elementary enrollment was going to drop by about 1,700 kids. So that was kind of the part of the grander picture of not only providing relief at overcrowding schools, but also creating the capacity for district-wide full-day kindergarten. And now with the legislature moving that option for full-day kindergarten back a year or up a year to 2016, we're struggling with trying to figure out how to address that issue in this year where we don't have that 1,700 student relief. Make sense?
Yeah, I just thought we already made this decision. Oh,
So,
yes, I'm confused.
so just as recall from the 2 study sessions that we had in October, this is what we walked away with from the direction of the board. So again, we wanted to minimize expenditures on portables next year that would then not be needed in 17-18. If there was an easy place to place a portable, we've probably put one there already. So we're talking about probably the most difficult to site, most expensive to site portables at our most impacted schools. Maximize the use of alternative instructional spaces. So anything that we can carve out for a classroom in a school, consider the North Shore Primary Center, etc. Explore creative, alternative use of teaching and support staff to create classroom space. So is there a way we can operate programs differently?
Do you mean like computer labs? That's what I said, or?
No, well, this will really come back more on options 3 and 4. So this will be, do you look at potentially class size differently as a way
I
of
don't remember that
mitigating?
being a directive from the board out of our October meeting.
Using
I
the
remember,
space?
I remember the minimize the portables, I think we did
This
talk
one?
about maximizing, but the exploring creative and alternative use of teaching, I don't remember that being a board directive, was it?
I remember it.
I believe it was, and this is the same list we've been utilizing
Okay,
since
I'm just
that
saying.
time.
Yeah, no, I think it was a very theoretical. There
Yeah.
weren't any specifics attached to it.
Minimizing the number of additional student moves away from their neighborhood schools. Continuing to offer what we call a hybrid, a combination of parent-paid, tuition-based full day, and half-day at schools that can't offer full day to all students. Adjust the number of full-day sections likely downward if necessary in order to address our enrollment capacity needs, and then maximize the state-funded full-day K we could receive at as many schools in the district as possible. So I would just point out that these directions, they're all on a scale. So if you prioritize one of these bullet points, think about it as pushing on a waterbed. If you push down over here, it's going to pop up over there. So they are all, there is no algorithm that you can look at these 6 bullets and it's going to point you to a specific solution. They are all relative in their scale.
I just remember the big decision we were making at that Wellington meeting was should we take state funds, should we not take state funds, and what was the balance that we were gonna do? I remember that being the biggest piece,
And I
and
think
seeing how many portable,
one of the things that's changed is it's now per classroom rather than per
Yeah, so let me get,
Okay.
so, yeah. So since that time, developments, we've had additional time to further refine and update the plan options, update enrollment projections, be much more granular in looking at the options that we presented and discussed with the board in October. And then as Sandy was saying, the other change is that we anticipate that within the next 7 to 10 days, as of yesterday, we are going to get confirmation from OSPI that they are going to allow us to accept state funding for full-day kindergarten at hybrid schools. So the old rules had been you couldn't get state funding unless you could provide full-day kindergarten for all students at the school. We will now in 16-17 be able to receive full-day kindergarten state money even if you can only offer full-day kindergarten for some of the students at the school because of space considerations. So what OSPI is working on, so I've been in direct contact with an assistant superintendent at OSPI. The funding decision is a firm decision. What they're working on is these sort of sub-bullets here is if you can only offer full-day kindergarten to some students at a school and you're accepting state money, who gets prioritized for that full-day kindergarten? And what that could mean is that if we have to, you know, the requirements are what I believe they'll be, which is you have to prioritize students of greater need. That may eliminate the lottery and opportunities for families without greater need, families who would otherwise be willing to or able to pay for tuition for full-day kindergarten to perhaps even get in the mix for full-day kindergarten in some of those schools. Okay. So this is just a draft that provides a very high-level overview of the 4 plans we've been looking at.
Can I just visualize that last little bit, and I'll use Woodmore just you know, that's what I use. So if I had a kindergartner, I'm without greater need. So I am not, and Woodmore obviously has a pretty high greater need population. Does that mean that if I have a kindergartner coming in to say Woodmore, I may not even have the opportunity to enroll in full-day care?
Correct. So what we would anticipate is that if we can offer only full-day kindergarten for, let's say, half of the kindergartners at Woodmore, and now we receive state funding, so we're done with the tuition
Okay.
world. That with that acceptance of state money for that full-day kindergarten, we are going to have to prioritize students of higher need. So if you're a family that you'd like full-day kindergarten as an enrichment or as part of your child care process, that even if you were willing to pay the tuition, expected to pay the tuition, that may not be an option for you.
And is it going to be free and reduced lunch, and how do we, is it a continuum, or is there a
We don't
line
know.
in?
That's what we don't know yet.
7 to 10 days. And the
Kind
speculation
of what are
is
they
that it's
saying?
what they've been doing, well, what they said previously, when we qualified for those schools that could qualify for full-day K, remember that's Wooden and Kenmore, that was based
poverty.
on high poverty. So if that's the same way they're gonna continue to prioritize, that's what we're speculating, but they haven't said.
Right, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how you, I guess it would just have to be free and reduced lunch. I don't know, see how you couldn't do a continuum, right? You just be cut off.
I don't know.
I think that's what's been the hang-up there is figuring out exactly how they want to craft that prioritization. I suspect it'll look something like how they prioritize the implementation of full-day kindergarten in general, which has just been sort of on a poverty scale. But we really won't know until we see the rules. What we do know, or what we're sufficiently confident in, is that they are no longer discussing whether you can get state funding for hybrid schools. That seems to be a decided issue. The answer to that is yes. The question is, in those hybrid schools, who and how would you prioritize?
And so then if you're in an east side school, like Bear Creek or Eastridge, then you can go into a lottery essentially because the poverty rate is lower.
Those schools have capacity
Oh,
to
they have
to
full
implement
day,
that's
full-day
right, I
kindergarten
forgot.
for all.
Okay.
Okay. So this is a high level look at the floor plan, so I'll just kind of go in order here so you can get sort of a mental set for the plan. So plans 1, 2, and 3 are maintain hybrid models. Plan 4 is a model that would implement full day kindergarten at all schools. So this would be all kindergartens. Plans 1, 2, and 3 are still maintain a full day, half day mix. Again, since October, we have updated our enrollment projections. We are trying to be as liberal as we can in our enrollment projections so that we are hopefully over planning. But also our anticipation is that once more full day kindergarten is available and there's no more tuition attached to it, that demand is going to increase. So that bump we see between kindergarten and first grade, where perhaps a number of kindergarten families keep their kindergarten students in private placements and then bring them into the schools in first grade, we think we'll see less of that. And more of those kids will be with us in kindergarten. So we're trying to accommodate that. Right now, we have capacity for 598 elementary classrooms. This is the number of classrooms that each plan requires. So you can see in certainly the cases of plans 1 and 2, more than 598, and less in plans 3 and 4. These are the number of program moves, so this is a combination of students who would be moving from perhaps a neighborhood school without room to a school with room, collapsing of computer labs, daycare, elimination of daycares, those kinds of things, YMCA. So this is kind of the net. And then these are the various portables that are envisioned in each of the plan options.
I'm so confused because in the full day kindergarten, when we had said no to Plan 4 because it was gonna require all these extra portables, and there it says we have 580, got all we need. Why is it less now than?
It's a different plan.
It's a different, so let me go up here, I didn't talk about this one, these last two. So,
Yeah, 'cause this is different.
so plans 1 and 2, for the most part, would maintain our current class size ratios. So the targets that we have right now for class sizes at grade levels, kindergarten through 6, would remain essentially the same. There are a couple of hiccups with that, potentially with a couple of schools, as there are every year with schools, but for the most part, those stay the same. Plans 3 and 4 are based on a modified class size ratio. So the idea would be we would still deploy teachers to schools based on the same ratios and formulas that we have now. We would target larger class sizes so that we would need fewer classrooms. So you might have, let's say, 30 teachers, 28 classrooms, 2 teachers who could then support classrooms somehow, but wouldn't necessarily have a classroom of their own.
But in our in our modified plan that we all agreed upon in this board meeting, except for the 2 board members that are no longer here, we weren't short on classrooms, and now we're short on classrooms. So I'm so confused on why that.
We've always been short on classrooms.
But we were adding, I wish I had the other documents in front of me.
Well, a lot of these are the same,
It's the same.
just updated.
Hmm.
So was it your impression that there was the ability to provide full-day kindergarten to everyone in the district?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, so if I'm clear,
Absolutely not.
okay, but if I'm clear that Plan 4, under the modified staffing, offers full-day kindergarten to every child in the district.
Right, but I don't remember.
So that's a different-
I don't
Because it's
remember that in the
That-
plan that we all
Because
chose.
it's new.
That
No,
was
yeah.
So
far.
this is new from October.
Okay,
So maybe
now I
a-
get that.
Maybe a better summary of the plans. The first plan is basically So there's still one short, but pretty much where we left the last study session.
Oh,
I
one
understand
short, okay, that's
Okay, it
right.
is only one short.
All right.
But Plan 2 doesn't use the primary center.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the big difference between 1 and 2.
And the
Plans
Plan 1
3 and
does.
4 does not.
Plan 1's the one we all agreed to,
Right.
essentially.
Plan 1, I would say, is our default plan.
But is that and what I'm trying to understand, is that what the board agreed to in the October meeting at Wellington? Is
With
that
new
the plan?
data.
So the board did not agree to a plan in October.
We were,
But we
I remember it was B
reviewed-
and E.
We reviewed a number of plans, we liked elements of different plans, and so what we walked away with as administration was, here are the elements we like in
No,
plans.
we were between B and E. I specifically remember that. We had 2 plans, and we were gonna do something between Plan B and
And
E.
that's what this is.
So it wasn't,
So these directions encompass what the board liked and didn't like, or wanted to see merged in B and E. And then what we have done since then is continue to refine that in these 4 plans.
So it's taking B and E and putting them together and
in
actually adding
Plan
numbers to
1
them.
or in
Yeah,
Plan 2, or are they
In
all
Plan
part
1,
of?
that's Plan 1, is B and E together, putting numbers attached to them, that's Plan 1. And then Plan 2 looks at it without the primary center. Is there a reason behind not including the primary center in
Yes.
Plan 2?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so what is that? What's the reason?
Primary center can only be used for half-day kindergarten.
Okay.
Because,
Which we
because we do not have the full complement of classrooms that we had hoped to have there, it is a less useful facility for us. But yet, even if we have half-day kindergarten there from some schools, we are still going to have to deploy a full infrastructure staff at that school, even if it's only for 6 or 7 classrooms, not the 12 that we had originally
And
envisioned.
one of the requirements from the board was to minimize the amount of kids who were
Moving.
moving from their
So-
non-current sister schools.
So again, you get down to this line, so again, all of these are not created equal. Plan 1 moves the most number of students, with the difference being the kids who would now be going to the primary center.
So I have a request. When we make changes to a plan, can we have the original plan so I can compare and go, here's where we were and here's where we are today, because this is,
Well, it is a lot of information, and that's what we, and
And I
some
thought-
jobs, we've been trying to get the information that we've been out of town. So what should we-
I can take a phone call, so Larry can call me at any point.
Yeah.
So are we counting the primary center as their home school, is that why
It's
then
not
the number
about-
drops?
No,
No.
no,
It's
we're,
not any
we're,
different.
counting, these are kids who would be, we're discounting kids who would be at the primary school, who would be transported from their
Oh,
home
you know
school.
what, I mixed up, yes, sorry, that was my fault. That was not my fault, sorry.
Okay, so you can see in plans 2, 3, and 4, the number of students who wouldn't be attending their neighborhood school is roughly similar.
If I can, give me just a sense of who those are. I assume it's North End kindergarten
You'll
students.
see in just a
You'll-
second.
Let's go to the map.
Thank you.
Okay, so this
Spoiler alert.
sort of breaks down the plans and their various elements in a little bit more detail. So same information up here at top. Plan 1, this itemizes sort of the program moves and modifications. So, 2 Frank Love, you've got 2 half-day, 3 full-day kindergarten, and 4 of the 7 first-grade classrooms. 2 Maywood Hills, 2 full-day, and 3 of 8 first grades from Kokanee, et cetera. So you can kind of see what all of the moves are, and you'll see these later graphically displayed on maps.
Is
But
our primary center not available now?
it is
It's available, it's
It's
just
still
not
available.
desirable.
Yes, it's just not a,
Because it's 6 half classrooms.
We always
Yeah,
knew that
6 or
we were
7,
planning on
correct,
using
7.
it, so has
Yeah.
something changed as far as like why we wouldn't want to be using it?
Yes,
Because we,
I think so. When we originally were going to upgrade it, right, with, you
Right.
remember all the different We were gonna have a kitchen there, we were gonna be able to have office space and a place for the principal and
The kitchen
some
was,
other,
was it a kitchen mix though, like that was not when we were presenting on October
Yeah,
13th.
we-
I think what changed is the parameters that we have to work within. So as Larry talked about in that summary parameters that we were given from the October 13th from the board, those parameters, the pressure points are different. So if we use NPC, this is what it looks like. If we don't use NPC and incorporate the, let's not move any more kids around, that means we're making a change from this year. We're not using NPC this year. So we're trying to follow the directions of the board that the board
I
was
just
given.
don't remember that being, I don't remember, I remember the board saying try not to move as many kids as possible, we'll use the primary center, we all left, but we all knew that we were gonna have to move kids. All of us knew that. So that's where it's.
So again, these plans are our attempt to take sort of those directions that we got from the board in October and model them in different ways, but they prioritize different elements of those directions. And so, if Plan 1 is the favored plan, then yes, we would be utilizing the primary center and moving more students. Plans 2, 3, and 4 move different students but have different trade-offs than Plan 1. And we'll get to cost in a minute because cost considerations vary across all the plans as well.
But before we leave, we haven't discussed, so are we gonna talk about the modified class size ratios that we're
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so you may remember this from October or some version of it. So this is the graphic representation of Plan 1. So use of the primary center, so for half day from Canyon Creek, from Fernwood, and from Kokanee, with full day kindergarten and 3 of the 8 first grades from Kokanee going to Maywood Hills. So maintaining that sister school relationship. Still 1 classroom going from West Hill to Kenmore for full day K, that's happening right now. And then Crystal Springs students going from half day K, full day K, and 4 of their 7 first grades to Frank Love. And first grade would be a new addition for them.
And just clarification, so then Frank Love already has some of those as kindergartners, so those kindergartners.
They have all of Crystal Springs kindergartners right
And so in some sense, so it's not a new move of those first graders for the most part, or?
All of the kindergartners at Crystal Springs currently are at Frank
Frank
Love. Potentially some of them could go back to Crystal Springs next year, so what we would probably want to do is look at, try and overlay the 17-18 boundary adjustments, because a
Right.
big chunk of Crystal Springs will move to Frank Love in 17-18 already, so if we can identify those first graders who are going to be part of Frank Love in 17-18 and move them, essentially they get their boundary adjustment a year early.
so I had that conversation with Sonia today,
Yeah,
and there are 24 of them.
so that's not gonna be enough.
It's
for
not gonna
4
be
classes.
enough to keep all of those kids there, but there are 24 kids that would eventually end up at Frank Love as a result of the new boundaries.
Oh,
She-
that's
That
good
was
to
her
know.
estimate.
That's good to know, you can at least keep them,
Right.
yeah.
So currently, we have Wooden and Kenmore Elementary with full-day kindergarten.
Correct.
So in this plan that we're looking at here, every one of these schools now has full-day and half-day? Or does some just have half-day in our model?
Every school now has full day and half day
In this model.
in this
In the
model.
And in
Yes.
Model 1, you still have,
Yes.
Some kids will get full day and some kids will get half day, depending on what the criteria is.
Right.
And the kids
Oh,
that end
right.
up with half day are going to move. So potentially, I could end up with, I would like full day, I don't get full day, and now I'm gonna get on a bus and I'm gonna go to the
Go
primary.
to the primary purpose.
Kenmore and Wooden will stay full day.
Yes.
Correct. And then in
Yeah,
this
they're all
plan,
done.
these schools, so these schools with boxes, shaded boxes around them, are the schools that we anticipate could accommodate full-day kindergarten for all students of the school. So again, East Side schools, Wellington, Hollywood Hill. And then where you see shortages, these would be places that we would be looking to backfill either with additional portables or potentially with some creative staffing adjustments to try and fit the enrollment of the school into the classrooms that are available.
And what we shared with you earlier is this is predicated around jurisdictions.
Right.
So we would have to work with the various jurisdictions, the counties or the cities around permitting.
Permitting.
That's gonna be the big challenge that we have to do.
So, just kind of a summary of Plan 1, again, so it would maintain current class sizes at most schools, only permits state-funded full-day kindergarten for all students at 9 schools, and those schools are Lockwood, Kenmore, Woodin, Hollywood Hill, Wellington, Eastridge, Sunrise, Bear Creek, and that should say Cottage Lake, sorry, CO. Uses the primary center for 7 classrooms. Some considerations around that. Primary center may be difficult to staff. Probably not a real attractive place for teachers to want to go. As the expense and the logistical difficulties support operationally, so more transportation required. We pretty much have to outfit it as a school of some magnitude, even if it's 7 classes or 12 classes, there still needs to be basic infrastructure there. And as Kathleen mentioned, we can anticipate a fair level of parent dissatisfaction of, I thought I would be able to pay for tuition-based full-day kindergarten. Now I don't have that option at my neighborhood school, and I have to get on a bus and go to the primary center. So that's a deal.
And
I
my
think
kindergarten
it's
is free.
because the plan that we were told at the board meeting, E&E, was sold to us as the best plan at the time.
We didn't sell a plan.
But the
So,
information has changed, because one of
And it was,
the,
I think, at the time.
At the
it
time
was
it
that,
was.
and then there's more information.
yeah,
Yeah, so now it seems like this is being,
so,
to look like it's not a good plan, when
If-
before it was like this.
Oh, no, and I'm sorry if I'm explaining it that way. These plans all are imperfect in their own ways. I'm not
No, I
like
know
trying to
that.
lead
That
you
was the
to
best
the,
of the plans available at the time.
based on the information we had, and then information has changed since then. And we have continued to refine and work these plans based on the feedback we got from the board in October.
because one of the bullet points is maximize state funding, and if the state is gonna fund it based per classroom as opposed to per whole school, then that's one of the directives
That's a
we
big
told
change.
them, that really
Right.
changed
It
it
does change.
in a huge way.
There's different ways to maximize
It sounds
state
like that's
funding.
the biggest thing that's changed.
That is the
That's-
huge.
That's the
It is-
driver of
That's the
this
driver
change.
right now.
It
Yeah,
takes-
right.
It takes tuition off the table,
Right,
in my mind.
And some increase in numbers.
that's our
We-
difference.
Yes, we went back and have looked at the numbers again and wanted to make sure we have rerun all the enrollment numbers, trying to be overly generous with what we think is gonna happen with enrollment growth, trying to anticipate that we will see again more of the kindergarten students next year, fewer in private placement, if all of a sudden now tuition is not a factor. So again, this plan moves the most students. Again, we've talked about the potential elimination of the lottery at the hybrid schools based on what we anticipate will be state regulations that will require prioritization of students with highest needs. And even at current class size ratios, some schools will still be tight. I go back to this map and we see the shortages here, and depending on where we may or may not be able to place portables, we may still be a classroom short here or there, and we'll need to look at some other alternatives to figure out how to meet the needs of that school.
Can I ask a question on this? Is it possible to guesstimate based on, since we know our school community is about what percentage is free and reduced lunch already, and we know how our constraints are for size, can we guesstimate how many schools might be a full day only for free and reduced situation? Are we talking 1 school, are we talking 6 schools? Does that make any sense?
No,
So if we know,
I don't think
So
they're gonna
We,
go there.
we haven't done that kind of.
okay.
Be student rather than.
So even if we looked at a ratio at a school, you can't
So-
necessarily carry that over to kindergarten registration?
So are you asking that if I'm at a school that's got 28% free and reduced lunch, that 28% of those kids would end at the end?
Or just as a thumbprint saying, okay, so if 28% are free and reduced, and we know we only have 4 classrooms for full day, and we kind of guesstimate what kindergarten
So
enrollment's gonna be,
23%
just
of
to
the
give us
total
a feel
population.
of how many schools would be in that situation where
We-
there's not even a lottery, but no lottery situation.
Oh, I don't think there will be a lottery, period,
And
if
I
we have
would-
those guidelines, but maybe.
I think it would be safe to say probably none, because when we go back, and we didn't talk about this in detail, some of the moves down here,
Mhm.
you know, so Canyon Creek, for instance,
Only 2 days.
you know, so we have 2 full day now for Canyon Creek, be reducing them to 1.
Yeah.
Fernwood, we have 4, be reducing to 2. Morelands, we have 3, be reducing them to 1. So in most of the schools that currently have multiple full day Ks are gonna decrease.
Okay, but that helps me scope. it.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
helps me scope it.
yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so Plan 2, basically very similar to Plan 1, except that it does not incorporate use of the primary center for the reasons we've talked about, the primary center being potentially problematic. So,
So I have a question though, how much money have we spent now to get this primary center up and running? Because we keep working on it, but now, I mean, what are we going to do with it?
Can't work on it anymore, that's the problem.
Huh?
I mean, we worked on it as much as we can, right?
We have,
We haven't spent anything since the initial rent payment,
Right.
with the exception of the required utility.
I thought we were transforming it into the part-time classrooms, we haven't been doing that.
actually, we don't do that,
Oh,
the
they're
church do
doing
that,
it.
yeah.
Okay,
So,
have
and
they
if we,
done
and
that?
if we don't, yes, I think it's all ready.
And
Or they have done,
They
have
did the
you guys
required.
looked at it?
revised.
They did the
Testing.
required ones, and
Right.
we've used it for testing.
Yeah, we've used it for testing. And
So
so,
it's ready or it isn't ready?
I believe it is ready, isn't it? More or less?
Well, we don't have a program in it, so
No, we don't.
they've done the work that we required them
So if
to
we
do.
wanted to put kindergartners in there, it would be ready to go. If we were doing that, it's
Yes.
ready to go, that's the answer
Yes.
I'm trying to.
Yes.
And we're still making the payments on it
Correct.
for rent.
And depending on which way, you know, which plan we move with, if we don't use it for kindergarten, then we're talking about what other things could we use it
That's
for.
because we're still making
Correct.
quite a bit of 400 or 500,000, right, over time.
It's, no, it's what, 375 a year or something like that.
Yeah, we don't have another rent
We put it
payment due
till
until
next
next
year.
August,
Right.
so we're not paying rent right
But we've got the building for the purpose of doing a primary center, and then obviously the East Lake Church did not follow through on their commitment,
Right.
so we couldn't put full day there. And then we were gonna modify it to put half day, and now that's what we're talking about, is now
Well,
not doing that.
the
potentially.
improvements they were able to make only qualify us to put half day there.
Correct.
We can't get permitted to put full day there.
Right, and for the benefit of, you know, David hasn't been in on these discussions, and
I
has been.
had a
videotaping.
pretty extensive briefing with Ken and David on
Maybe that's why I'm the one that's not in the loop right now.
it. So again, Plan 2, essentially with not utilizing the primary center, the number of classrooms we get short grows. And so this plan would involve the greatest number of portables of the 4 plans. And we have, as Ryan has said, concerns about whether or not, you know, we can, in theory, say this number of portables would make this plan work. We're not certain yet that we can actually get permitting and citing permission for all of those
So did
portables.
every board member here have a separate meeting?
Not separate, like,
No.
up in the coordination meeting?
we had a study session, we had a follow-up study session.
So I talked about this with Ken and David in kind of an onboarding meeting that we had, where we talked about a number of things. I've seen other board members in coordination meetings and other meetings where I've been able to sort of
So I'm just,
talk a little bit about it.
maybe
And I
that's
sent
why
an email, I'm part, I did call you, but I sent an email to
Okay,
you and
and I
invited you to
haven't-
come in for a briefing prior to this meeting.
Okay, so that's probably why I'm the one that's kind of like taken
Yes.
back.
Yeah, it's a lot of new
Everyone else is
information.
like- Everyone else is like seeming in the, because I'm like, isn't anyone else like,
Yes.
okay.
So
If I don't check my email, please give me a phone call, because I would have came in, or at least I would have known that this was what it was about.
One thing, if I may, that I was curious about is, Ryan, if we can't get permitting in some of these locations, I mean, does that kind of force between 1 and 2 back to decision one, we use the primary center?
We use the primary center or modify ratios or some combination of that.
Are there jurisdictions we're more worried about than others?
I think your north end jurisdictions, I think they are at the place where, so I would say your Canyon Creek, Shelton View,
So,
Fernwood potentially, I think we have about 17 portables out there already. I'm not sure if they will allow us to add or site another portable. You know, some of it may not be restrictions, it may be more restrictions on site. So for example, Arrowhead, there's just no place to place the portable at Arrowhead.
Is there any possibility of placing portables in existing property like multi-site or North Creek High School site? Is there any chance of that as an option?
Probably not, given the lack of utilities or facilities.
And a lack of a
Site.
principal or
Yeah, it presents some of the
Yeah,
same,
but mobile home
presents some of the
admin
same
is-
challenges as the primary center, even if you could put a half a dozen portables on a piece of property, you've got to support those classrooms.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So, just kind of the summary of Plan 2. Again, similar to Plan 1, maintains current class sizes at most schools. Only permits state-funded full-day kindergarten for 9 schools, again, the same 9. Again, that should be Cottage Lake, not Canyon Creek. Doesn't use the primary center. It minimizes student moves, so it's about half or 60% of the numbers of students moved away from their neighborhood school as Plan 1. This plan works if we can cite those 16 portables that are part of the plan. Again, that's a pretty significant capital cost of potentially around $4 million.
I remember that was one of the board directives to not use portables, to use minimal portables.
Yeah. So this is
Attractive on
It's
that,
one of
on
those
that
trade-offs.
dimension, it's very
Yeah.
attractive.
Oh, that's true.
So we will,
It's a thorn coming up through that waterbed.
And we have to show it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Here's a model.
Right.
Larry, is there any market for a used portable 1-year-old? I mean, can we offload a percentage of the 16?
Well, there's probably more of a market
David
now than
used
at other
portables.
times.
We just
But,
need one year.
I think the answer is potentially, except it's very expensive just to site a portable. So, you know, to lay the foundation, have it moved up here, put together, I mean, it's 50 to 75,000 or more.
And then just take it back off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the portable itself is cheap.
Okay.
It's the whole setting the foundation, siting it, bring utilities, everything else. That's where the big cost is at. Yeah.
Okay, so Plan 3, this is what we're calling the modified class size ratio with still a hybrid full day and half day. And I'll get into sort of, so what we've done with Plans 3 and 4 is we've said if our class size targets for grade levels are here, if we increase them, and so in theory, if you could say, probably at a large school, if you had 8 first grade classrooms, and you only had 7 first grade classrooms and dispersed that 8th classroom through those 7 other classrooms, you pick up a classroom, and you have a teacher now who's not assigned to a classroom who can then support those other classes. That's sort of the theory behind it. So when we run that through the whole system, this is what we come up with as far as classrooms that, from a modeling standpoint, become available at the various schools.
I don't understand
Yeah,
how.
can I just clarify what that would look like? So,
Since I didn't have the
We have a slide
conversation.
coming up that.
well,
will show
yeah,
it.
okay, all right.
So, in this model, we'd still be moving half-day and full-day from Kokanee to Maywood. We'd still be moving half-day and full-day from Shelton View to Frank Love. I think we're just moving, we have all the
Yeah,
kindergarten.
these are less, we're moving less,
Moving fewer
least
students.
amount of kids.
And then half-day and full-day from Crystal Springs to Frank Love as well.
But no first grades.
No first grade.
And that was definitely something we talked about
Right.
at October 13th, because we didn't want to move in first grade.
And then, of course, in these schools that show open classrooms, again, this is based on modeling. we wouldn't expect that a school would necessarily keep an open classroom and have higher class sizes elsewhere. If they had a classroom and they didn't, and they used, and they didn't need the room for overall enrollment or for enrollment growth, we expect that they would have classes that would look more similar to what they would look like now. But just from a modeling standpoint, this is what the model creates as far as classroom capacity at various.
And the other thing I think that's important to see on this one, I just saw it, is that the schools with the box are the only full day, all full day
Yes,
schools.
that's correct.
So there's only 1, 2, 3,
It's
4,
nine.
5.
Right, it's
plus
still the
four,
same number.
Right,
Okay.
same number.
So the vast majority of the top of the district is not getting full day kindergarten for all.
For everybody.
Right.
So-
That's the way it was, that's the same, correct? As in what we discussed originally,
Correct,
as far as who gets all full day.
correct.
But does it reduce
Right.
the situation of no lotteries taking place for full day potentially?
Yes.
Some-
Okay,
It produces.
so good add a lottery back.
So,
Go ahead.
okay, so I'm sorry, but I'm just catching up. So, it's kind of like we have that no surprise rule and feeling surprised. So, Crystal Springs, we're still sending 5 classrooms to Friend Club.
Correct.
Is that what that's saying? And in Shelton View, we're sending 1 or 2 classes.
One
We
half
still have
day,
to
one
move.
classroom of half-day students, so 2 sections of half-day,
So we
and
still
1
have,
section of full-day students.
okay, so we're still moving,
Some kids.
but some
we're moving some kids.
Fewer students than Plan 1, about the same numbers as Plans 2 and 4.
And less than this year.
Yes.
This meets one of the board criterias of
Minimizing
just
the
minimizing the amount of kids that move and continuing your sister schools that I think we currently have this year.
And minimize purchase of portables.
Correct.
So this one hits 3.
Right. So, again, summary of Plan 3, increase class sizes, yet no overall increase in full-day kindergarten. Some buildings will need to increase class sizes, and then we'll create non-classroom assigned teachers that will be used to support those larger classes. Other schools will be able to maintain current class sizes. And again, the schools that are more likely to be able to maintain current class sizes will be schools primarily on the east side of the district, or the schools that we've been looking at that are
Kenmore, Woodmore.
So when we
Oh, I
say
get it.
increase class size, what kind of a number are we talking about?
good. I'll get to it. This model preserves some capacity for growth because again, in the mathematical modeling, we have numbers of open classrooms. Again, we wouldn't necessarily keep those classrooms open if the enrollment demands didn't say that we needed those classrooms. But in theory, just the modeling of larger classes across the board creates greater capacity. Don't have to use the primary center, minimizes the number of students moved, and this plan would only require district-wide 1 additional portable. And again, the issue with the lottery, we would anticipate that in our hybrid schools, we would have to prioritize higher need students, and so likely not a lottery for families who are willing to pay for full-day kindergarten. Okay. Plan 4, this is the all full-day kindergarten model. So again, the same premise of Plan 3, a sort of generalized increase of class size targets, and implementing full-day kindergarten at all schools in the district. So what the biggest difference you'll see between this map and this map is, by and large, all of these classrooms, or many of these classrooms that here show as open, get utilized for full-day kindergarten. makes sense? So still would need to move all the full-day kindergarten from Kokanee to Maywood, all the full-day kindergarten from Shelton View and Crystal Springs to Frank Love. Other than that, everybody else would be staying within their neighborhood schools. And so there's a simplicity to it, but obviously a significant trade-off.
And there's four portables you're going to.
Yeah, yeah. Again, increased class sizes at some schools, but permits state-mandated full-day kindergarten for all students at all schools. So we would be going from 42 sections of full-day kindergarten in plans 1, 2, and 3 to 75 district-wide. No half-day kindergarten. Potential for class size inequities between schools that have the capacity, primarily again the east side schools, they could maintain current class sizes, wouldn't need to up class sizes to create classroom space. And the schools under this plan that would need to go that route to create the classrooms they need to implement, well, just accommodating their enrollment and accommodating full-day kindergarten for all students. We would need to hire 20 to 30 additional teachers for 2016-17, again, representing the number of increased full-day kindergarten sections. So a teacher that is teaching half-day now and is teaching maybe 40 or 45 students, now we need to hire another teacher because those classes are going to be separated and each need a full-time teacher. There are positive and negative consequences for that, so knowing that full-day kindergarten is coming for certain in 17-18, we think there's going to be a rush and a premium on teachers. And so getting out into the labor market, the labor pool in 16-17 perhaps gives us an advantage in trying to front load more of that hiring, and we imagine that the market's going to be much tighter in 17-18 than in 16-17. Negative consequences are that as we head into implementing grade reconfiguration and boundary adjustments, and we'll be moving large numbers of teachers around the district, those vacancies give us flexibility to perhaps avoid more involuntary transfers or to right-size schools naturally.
Is there any possibility we hiring 20, 30 teachers and then not need some of them in a year? Or are we gonna need all of those teachers?
Well, we should need all of them.
Because in 2017, it's all full
Yeah.
day, so.
The downside is we may hire them in 1 year,
Right.
and then we may need them, but we may need them somewhere else the following year. But Jeff, is there more you want to say on that?
Well, just that it's a big influx of primary teachers, and we need to move elementary teachers to middle school in 17-18, and those are unlikely to be kindergarten teachers that will do that. So it'll complicate the staff transfer process.
And then obviously this plan creates non-classroom assigned teachers. So again, back to the model of if I've got 8 first grades and now instead I'm going to have 7 first grades, disperse that 8 classroom of kids across those 7, now I've got that extra teacher. So how we deploy that teacher, where we find a workspace for that teacher, all of those kinds of operational considerations are very real with this plan. Again, doesn't require use of the primary center, minimizes student moves, requires 4 additional portables. Now, we did talk about the time constraints around portables, so we have ordered those 4 portables, just to make sure that we are in the system.
So can you not, you get your money back?
So
We don't need them?
we can cancel depending on the plan that the board gives us direction with.
There's only one option that doesn't require at least 4 portables, so
Right.
3 out of 4 need to,
And if we're going to go more, we need to act quickly. So
You guys have all had time to think about this, so.
um,
I don't really thought about it, I think we just were aware that there was a new plan.
So the other issue with this plan is it limits capacity for growth. So whereas in Plan 3, there are, because we're not implementing full-day kindergarten everywhere, there's the potential for many more open classrooms, so if enrollment comes in even higher than our already liberal projections for next year, this plan has more flexibility than this plan.
And Larry, if you could go back to the picture of Plan 4. So I see Morelands has 3 short. Would we do something there like we're doing with Frank Love to perhaps move them, or is that where the portables would go?
So we would either,
Just ballpark.
yeah, so replace the portables at one of these 3 schools that you see here. And or order another portable or look at some type of other mitigation.
Like
Mitigation.
Arrowhead is very close.
Right, that's
there.
right, yeah, right, so
We
you don't have to
can
go
move
across
on.
the
So
sliver or
depending on
whatever.
that, we would move.
Thanks.
So Larry, these 4 plans had the board directives of maximizing full-day kindergarten and looking at those different models. Is there one of these models that's similar to just kind of what we have right now, which is kind of half-day kindergarten everywhere except for 2 schools that are full-day, and maintain that for another year? Is that?
I would say the closest we have to status quo would be plans 1 or 2.
We said to maximize the dollars of full-day kindergarten where we could. So that's,
So status quo
If
plus.
we took that priority though and made that less of a priority, that parents would pay another year of full-day kindergarten. I mean, does that help with our staffing and our portable needs and our busing students to different areas for 1 year? Does that help?
Probably not, because when we look at the numbers of, when we go back here and we look at, I'm sorry to keep buzzing back and forth in this, but my sense would be no, because when we look here at the number of, even in plans 1 or 2, the number of reductions in full-day kindergarten offerings, even if folks are paying tuition for those smaller number of offerings, I don't think it really changes, it doesn't really move the needle much as far as the overall capacity issue, your question.
Because we already have full-day at many of these schools.
Right, exactly.
We have full day at all
At all
schools, that's
schools,
just
right.
an important thing
Yeah.
to, I wasn't sure you knew that, but we have full day at every school now, and we have half day at every school.
And one big factor that's changed
Except for Kenmore.
in our planning premises is that when, and you know, it's not official yet, but it's all but official, the state comes forward and says, we'll pay for any full-day kindergarten you offer next year, regardless of whether you can offer it to all students in a school or not. Our belief has been that there is no way we could continue, we could go to our parents and say, we can get state funding for this, but we need you to continue paying $3,500 in tuition for another year. And we just presumed that that was a non-starter. You know? I guess I would open myself to be challenged if we're wrong in that.
I won't challenge you on that.
So, kind of more sort of what this looks like and kind of answer some of the questions that have come up along the way. So this is still the same up here. So these are the projected numbers of classrooms, and they're the same in plans 1 and 2 that we would need at each grade level. So Jeff has actually gone through and looked at our projected enrollment at each school, at each grade level, and configured classrooms. So how many, divided kids in classrooms. Now, obviously, that's based on a snapshot in time right now. Those numbers will change and evolve over the next 10 months, but at least for modeling purposes, we needed to say, how could this actually look? So you can see the numbers of classrooms that are needed, half-day K, full-day K, tuition-based K. Put these two together now because, this is, yeah. All right.
Okay.
And then when you look at 3 and 4, so here's what this really looks like when we talk about modifying class sizes. So in first grade, 1 and 2 are current class size targets or ratios, 81.5 first grade, which means there's a 1-2 split somewhere in the district in this plan. And then that goes to 74. So district-wide, 7.5, or what is that? Yeah, 7.5 classrooms are gained by that use of a modified class size target. And you can just see the differences at each grade level
I know,
here.
because you're adding another teacher.
Well, it's same number of teachers. Smaller number of
Configuring the kids
classrooms.
different. Right. So if you look at the bottom, Kimberly, I don't know if you can see it because it's way down here. So what used to be minimum average class, maximum, and then district-wide averages.
So if I can say, I'm trying to come up with the right language. So there's a classroom number, and then there's a class ratio.